parties down here to observe. We will be conducting an interview of the only candidate for State Attorney General who agreed to come down today. And then after that, we have two assembly districts scheduled, Assembly District 37 and 41. Let me briefly run through the rules of engagement. This is not a debate, it's an interview. So there is no redirect questions after the candidate has answered the initial question from the panelists. Candidates will start off with a 1.5 minute introductory statement. Panelists then will have 30 seconds to pose their questions, and the candidate will have 1 minute to respond. If time allows, we'll have additional questions posed by panelists or potentially members of the audience. I would caution you that this is not a forum for airing personal grievances, and complex questions that require too lengthy of an answer will be disqualified. With that, let's get underway. And our candidate for Attorney General is Adam Laxalt. Please make your 1.5 minute introductory statement. Thank you.
Good afternoon, I'm Adam Laxalt.
Get up on the microphone.
Sorry, it's hard to hear you.
Good afternoon, I'm Adam Laxalt. I'm the Republican candidate for Attorney General, and I'm a former Navy veteran. Also served in Iraq 2006 and 7 with an Army MP brigade where we did detainee ops operations there. I'm running for Attorney General because I believe our state needs new leadership, and I believe our country needs new leadership. The exciting thing about the Attorney General's office is that it can be used to help fight back the federal government, help give us some of the sovereignty that we've lost gradually and sometimes drastically over the past many decades. There are many AGs around the country that are using this office to forcefully protect their states, to fight against the overreach of the executive branch and the administrative state. This is something I look forward to doing with the office. And the other most important job of the Attorney General is to be the top prosecutor, the top law enforcement officer of the state. This is what I did in the Navy. I was a Judge Advocate General where I worked hand in hand with law enforcement, and I look forward to doing that as well in Nevada. Thank you.
Thank you. Our first question will be posed by Tom Blanchard, who is a Navy veteran and the president of Veterans Real Estate.
How you doing, Adam?
Great.
I'm going to make this one, well, short and sweet. Yeah, I'll go with this one. What would be your greatest strengths that your opponent doesn't have?
Well, I'm just here to talk about myself, but what I'll say is I believe that I bring leadership to this office. I've had to lead men and women in the service. I've had to deal with changing environments. Certainly in Iraq, it was one of the most fluid places you can ever have to serve. And I think we need new leadership. I've never ran for office before, and I've never even run for a class president. So I'm running because I think I can make a difference, and I hope to make a difference for Nevada.
Our second question will be asked by Mike Angel, founder of Nevada Legal Forms and Tax Services. Mike?
What is your philosophy of paralegals doing work for the general public? Not under supervision of an attorney.
I don't know if I have a philosophy on that, but I'd be happy to talk to you about it.
Okay. Our next question there is Amber Guyman, who is in fact a paralegal.
What sector of the population in Nevada suffers the most by not having the sovereignty from the federal government in your eyes?
Well, I think every sector is suffering right now. I mean, the biggest problem is our entire economy is flat and sagging because of the growth of government. I believe with less government, our small businesses and our medium businesses around the state would be able to grow. And I hear it all around the state. There are too many regulations, and perhaps even worse, there's too much inconsistency in the existing laws and the application of them. So as a business leader, whether you have 5 employees or 100, you can't adapt to an environment that changes weekly or monthly. Take Obamacare, which is the easiest example. This presidential administration has done 21 unilateral changes of this law. Many arguably are unconstitutional, but certainly the biggest problem with them is that they create uncertainty for these business leaders that are trying to solve problems and lead their companies.
Our next question will be posed by Melissa Broadway.
I take it that beep is my, that's enough?
The beep is the time limit.
Okay, thank you.
Melissa Broadway is a political consultant. And
Hello.
Karen.
Hello, thank you for being here. My question to you is, you had said in your opening remarks that one of your main strategies or platforms would be to have your office work more effectively with law enforcement. And I was wondering, how could that be done? How could it be, you guys come together as one unified force when it comes to executing the laws of the state of Nevada?
Well, the primary job of the Attorney General is to make sure that you're watching the systemic criminal problems in the state. So my perspective is the only way I can know as the statewide elected office holder what's going on in 17 counties in this state is to make sure I'm very, very engaged with the 17 sheriffs and district attorneys at the local level. And what you can do is make sure, take heroin for example. This is a growing trend that's really hurting our state, and it's something that's hurting our high school age kids and has a terrible ripple effect. If you're an active AG and you are really down there in the trenches knowing what's going on, you can be in front of a curve like this. You don't need to wait till it's already hit us. And you can help address whether it's additional law enforcement mechanisms that they don't have. Perhaps the statutes are behind if it involves the internet, for example. And that's something you can do to make sure you're fulfilling your job in your communities.
Jay Giraldi is our next panelist. He is a Marine veteran.
Hey,
Hoorah.
Rob. Just to, part of my question would be, how did you end up attached to an Army detachment instead of a Marine detachment or Navy detachment? And then, because you were in the Navy, right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. And then, part of that question was, do you remember a few years back when I think it was Lieutenant Governor was running for Senate against Harry Reid, and then all of a sudden the Attorney General was prosecuting him? You remember that? You recall that?
Yes.
If you, what's your viewpoint on that past situation? And how would you have what's your viewpoint on it, basically?
Well, how I ended up with an Army unit is that around 2006, the U.S. Army and the Marine Corps were both getting really spread thin with multiple deployments, multiple tours. The U.S. Secretary of the Navy said we're going to find volunteers and try to pitch in. So I'm a result of that. I volunteered to go over there, and this was a job that needed to be filled to go over there, work in the detainee world. It was a purple position. I had a gunny that I worked with all the time. And we had multiple services with us, but it was an MP brigade, which was principally in charge of the force. We did have, for the second half of my tour, a 2-star Marine general that was in charge of the entire task force. Second part, I had never read anything more than you. I've got newspaper headlines to go off of all of that. I think it's very important. The Attorney General needs to be careful to be nonpartisan and make sure they don't politicize this office. And that's really all I have to say about this. It looked from afar like it was potentially a political thing, but I've never really read the briefs or seen the investigations, and I have nothing more to go off of.
Our next panelist is Rowena Criffington. I've done this correctly about 9 times before I mess it up. She's the founder of the Shine Family Foundation.
Hi, Adam.
Hello.
Do you support the drug testing? I'm sorry, do you support the use of polygraph by private businesses? And do you support the use by government?
Well, I started saying this in my answer to the last question. I mean, it's very important that everyone understands the Attorney General's job is to be the top legal enforcer. So the Attorney General can't get in the business of deciding from a policy perspective whether he likes or dislikes certain laws. My job as the Attorney General is to enforce the laws as they are. And so I'm not dodging your question other than to say I don't know exactly what the status of those things are, but whatever the status is, it's my job as Attorney General to enforce them as they are. And if people don't like that, it's a policy position to try to change the rules.
Our next panelist is Dr. Danielle Dubray. She is a holistic.
Las Vegas is known to be a hub for human trafficking, especially young girls. What could be done to curb that?
Well, the current Attorney General has done at least attempt to do a lot with this world. The last session, there was a human trafficking bill passed that expanded the ability of law enforcement to try to go after this. As far as I understand, there was a task force or coalition built to try to fight this. So this is certainly an AG world thing that I would want to work very aggressively on. And you know, like anything, you need to spend time and attention on some of the major issues and make sure that you have all the tools you can to enforce them. But it's a very big problem in Nevada, and something that I think has already started to be taken seriously, but it's something we need to do a lot more with.
The next panelist is Nevada Attorney Michael Major.
Good afternoon, Adam.
Good afternoon.
I want to get some of your feedback on whether you believe that Nevada could use a corticopills in its court system currently.
I think that belongs in the category of something that is just not for me to weigh in as an AG. And I think it also falls in the long answer category of Councilman Beers. There are pros and cons to it, and it's a tough question.
Okay, another Nevada attorney, this one also a medical doctor, Dr. Jasmine Brooks is our next panelist.
Thank you for being here. Identity theft is one of the fastest growing crime in the country, and Nevada incorporated it as well. How vigilant are you going to be with pursuing identity theft? Because a few years ago I was told, oh, it's no big deal because it's a white collar crime.
Look, one thing that the Attorney General has to do is to deal with systemic problems. And that is, we have good DAs and sheriffs that are dealing with local crime, but it is the job of the Attorney General to understand this kind of an issue, identity fraud, things that are hitting all Nevada residents and work on ways to solve them. And it's very important, something I'll work on and make sure that I understand the problem fully as it's hitting Nevada and work to address it, certainly.
Our next panelist is Brian Bashant. He is an Army veteran and the president of Fallen Not Forgotten.
How you doing? Thank you very much for coming. As an Attorney General and as an enforcer, what are you going to do about illegal immigration in Nevada right now?
Well, the job of the Attorney General is to just uphold the current regime. And unfortunately, we do get some mixed signals trying to figure out which laws we're supposed to enforce and which ones we're not from the federal government these days. But I'm going to have to make sure I understand fully what the sets of laws are and what the job of the Attorney General is to do to enforce those.
Next panelist is John Shute Jr. He rides a metro vehicle when he is not here asking us questions.
Okay. I have a question. In the foreseeable future, we'll probably see full legalized marijuana here in the state of Nevada. And a couple fellow officers that I know up in the state of Washington have talked about a situation with me where they stop an individual has marijuana on them and it's legal for recreational use up there. The officer takes it while he does an investigation, and because it's legal, has to return it to the individual. Now, ATF comes along and says, well, then we can arrest the officer for redistributing drugs, because it's still a federal felony. How do you foresee this affecting? Yeah, how do you foresee this affecting the state of Nevada? Because law enforcement's already confused with the medicinal marijuana issue, but if we make it full legal, such as Colorado and Washington, how do you foresee that working out against federal law?
Well, I mean, if we would be many years away from legalizing recreationally, and if I'm sitting AG, hopefully I will be up to speed on the developments and on top of, you know, what law enforcement is supposed to do and how they're supposed to react. I mean, right now I'm not dodging it, it's just so hypothetical that I really couldn't answer. And I think certainly on the medical marijuana side, there's already confusion, and I think it's tough. I think sheriffs feel confused, city councils feel confused, and I wish I had the answer, but I don't.
That's the first time I heard that one. It's quite interesting. I'll pass that around City Hall on Monday. So I can imagine we're having a lot of discussion. Karen Steelman is the Auxiliary Director of Veterans in Politics, and she is our next panelist.
That's it? Good afternoon, Mr. Laxalt. Thank you for joining us here today. I understand that you have a pretty impressive pedigree and that there was some controversy about that about a year ago. However, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't matter about the person that you are. But I can't help but notice you use the name Paul, and that's your grandfather's name, and it's a very well-known name in Nevada. And if you're deliberately using that as for name recognition.
Can you see this? I have on everything I've printed Adam Laxalt. So I'm not sure what you're talking about. I used the name Adam.
You can blame Steve for that then. He sent me the email.
Okay.
Okay, then my real question is, what do you think that the experience that your pedigree does offer you or provide you can benefit Nevada?
Well, I kind of answered that question with Tom, but no, I come from never having run from political office before, so I hope to bring in new energy. I hope to bring in some new leadership, and I've also had a lot of different experiences. I mean, to my knowledge, I'm the only person running or in statewide office that is an Iraq or Afghanistan war veteran that has served in the past, in the past decade. So, I certainly want to bring that to bear for our veterans in this state. That I think you can never make up for the gap of having someone in public service that does not know the military. If you don't know the military, you don't know the military, and you can try, and even if you care, you can pay attention, but unless you've been in that world and in that community, you're always going to be not quite understanding. So it's something that we have 300,000 veterans in Nevada. We have plenty of issues with our veterans, and something that I want to help a lot with this office.
Thank you, and thank you for your service.
Yes, ma'am.
And thank you for, I guess we can go, you want to go another round?
Do we have audience who would like to ask a question?
All right, let's have an audience question.
Yes, Ed Yulin.
You got to get right close to the microphone.
Okay, Ed Yulin. Adam, you mentioned a lot about the crime, you're the crime officer of the state of Nevada, but you haven't said one word about the crimes that are committed by the different government agencies constantly. For example, the Southern Nevada Water Authority constantly violates the open meeting laws. and the Attorney General does nothing about that. The police department is shooting people like flies. Mayor Goodman has in his book a story about one of his clients who was beat up by 4 policemen who all went and testified, gave a totally different story, and none of those policemen were prosecuted.
Time short, so what's the question?
The question is, are you going to prosecute the government agencies who are major criminals in this state?
You know, the Attorney General job is a very serious position, and you're the top lawyer, and anything that comes our way, of course, we'll look at and investigate. That's all I can say.
I think we had one more question that Rowena Crichton said she might have, but didn't have time to ask. Kind of in another way of having more time and not having more time. So Christina, please, perhaps, or Rowena, please ask a question.
Mr. Laxalt, what would your first action be once elected?
I think the first action would be to join a number of the Obamacare lawsuits that are currently being pushed, hopefully, to the Supreme Court by a group of attorney generals. And I think along those lines, it would be to immediately start evaluating which other lawsuits we either need to join or write ourselves for the federal actions that are directly affecting our state. For example, sage grouse is a large issue right now, and something that would be catastrophic for our economy. And I would go right to work on any legal options we have to try to protect our state from the sage grouse being listed and devastating our economy.
Sure. I've got the lights right in my eyes.
Okay.
So do I.
Is there any law that you would not enforce that would go against your conscience? And if there is, would you give an example?
You know, I think it's very important, I'm sorry if I'm repeating myself, but I think it's very important that the Attorney General remains apolitical. Historically, the Attorney General's job is to enforce the law. It's really not complicated. And it's only a recent trend, I think made worse by the current U.S. Attorney General Holder, where he's telling Attorney Generals, if you don't like the law, don't apply it. That's very, very bad for our state. It's very, very bad for consistency of the rule of law. So that's the long answer to say no, there's nothing on my head that I would not enforce. Your job is to enforce the law. And you may not like 20, 30% of the law, but it's my personal views or opinions shouldn't be relevant. Certainly when I was a Navy JAG, you swear the oath to the Constitution and you serve in that capacity. You didn't get to pick and choose. You know, your personal views never came through. You just did the job, and I would do the same thing as an Attorney General.
Okay. Is it okay if I just make it a little more detailed then?
Now that I know who you are.
Okay. Say, put yourself back in 1945, you're in Germany, Nazi regime, and you're the Attorney General. Is there any laws in that particular environment that you would not enforce go against your conscience?
Look, obviously, I'll use the military analogy there again, which is, your job is, if you're in the chain of command in the U.S. military, you follow the chain of command. But under, extreme exceptional circumstances, your duty as an officer to say, this is not a law that I can follow in good conscience. Again, extreme circumstance. And so is there a hypothetical situation?
Can you give an example that would go against your conscience in that kind of situation?
Yeah, well, that example, certainly if there was a law that we were supposed to start exterminating an entire sector of the society, that's not something I would enforce. That's what you're asking.
Well, we have one more question. I'm having a hard time seeing the lights. Rowena?
Mr. Laxalt, my I founded Shine Family Foundation. What we do is we help the families of our U.S. military deployed and returning veterans.
Of which, ma'am?
Shine Family Foundation, what we do is we help the families of our U.S. military deployed and returning veterans.
Of the youth military? I'm sorry, I'm not hearing what you're saying.
U.S.
U.S.
Oh,
U.S.
military, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Okay, got it.
You said earlier that you would do everything and anything you can to help. And what kind of help? How would you do that?
Well, certainly, we've got VA issues right now, and to the extent that having a veteran that's in an elected office can go and speak up, we have some other elected officials that are doing that as well in the state, but I would join that fight and use my office as forcefully as I can to try to get some accountability. But, it's just very important to address some of the issues that we have, and to have someone that's willing to use their time in office to help veterans is a priority, and I think it would be very, very helpful. I'm the type of person, I've always been, that if there's a problem, I try to solve it. And certainly have done that in the community, and think I did that when I served my country. So if I'm the sitting AG and there are veteran issues, and I have any way to impact that, of course I'm going to be lending my time and energy to do that.
Okay, I think that sounds like the last question. Panel, thank you very much. Thank you, Mr. Laxalt, for coming down here today. We will resume in approximately 15 minutes with State Assembly District 37. Then, hall 41 is scheduled at 4:40.